Welcome to Behind the Podium, Unveiling the Coach. Problem solvers have problems too. So here at Behind the Podium, I, Jared Cohen, and my co-host Alexander Ellis discuss the struggles, philosophies, demands, and practices of the coach, or said more broadly, health and wellness practitioner. To provide quality coaching is to enhance someone's life in an everlasting and unfolding way. This is not easy and requires a lot of due diligence and self-mastery on the part of the coach to be able to perform. So without further ado, join us as we dig deeper into the depths of the coach's mind. Back to Behind the Podium, and today we are super pumped. Another guest episode. We're going behind the podium with mental skills and sport performance coach Katie McKee. Katie owns her own private consulting business, Elite Mind and Performance, which is currently located in Southern California. She consults with individual athletes, teams, and organizations, training them in sports psychology skills and techniques, as well as sport performance training aimed at helping them to improve their performance and increase their self-awareness as they strive to reach their potential. Katie has worked as a mental fitness coach for such programs as the Loyola Marymount University, for the women's soccer team, Loyola Marymount University women's tennis team, and the University of Redlands women's soccer team. And Katie and I got to know one another recently because she is a alum of John F. Kennedy University, which I am currently attending for my master's in sports psychology, and Katie graduated in 2009 with her master's, and I was super fortunate enough to have Katie as my coach / supervisor as I was doing my first sports psychology internship just this past summer. So we're super excited to be here, myself and Alex with Katie. So
yeah, thanks for having me, guys. Excited to be here.
Thank you so much, Katie. It's
this is sort of like the coach inside the coach inside the coach, or behind the coach. Like there's a couple levels of coaching potential happening right now.
Yeah, it gets confusing, but I'm trying to keep it all together here.
We like it to get super coach meta. How many layers of coaching can we go? So if you don't mind, we'll just kind of start somewhat generally. Where are you from originally? And when or why and how did sports psychology come into the mix for you?
Originally, I was born in New Jersey, but I grew up in the Bay Area, just outside of San Francisco, pretty close to JFK's campus in Danville, California. What? And honestly, I hadn't heard of sports psychology until I got to college. I was a two-sport athlete, and I unfortunately broke my right leg my freshman year of college playing soccer. And the process of coming back from that was tough, and not just physically, but more so, I would say, mentally. In my senior year in college, they offered a 1-month class on sports psychology, and I took it, and I thought, man, this is amazing. I love this. And this is the piece for me that was missing during my recovery from all my injuries. And so from there, I was like, you know what, I'm going to pursue higher education in this and see if I can build a career in this field. So the rest is history. I ended up at JFK for my master's and graduated in 2009 and been dabbling in the sports psych field ever since.
Very cool.
That's awesome.
So I worked in college as a student athletic trainer and took some sports psychology classes as well. And I'm curious, when you were injured, did they not provide you with any type of support? Because I know there's that huge sense of loss when you're not because I saw the athletes who were coming into the training room, they were like no longer a part of the team as they were before because they couldn't practice with them. They were stuck with us.
Yeah, there was a tremendous amount of support. It was just sports psych at that time was still so unknown, I think. I mean, and it's still the field in general is in its infancy if you compare it to other psychology degrees and professions. So yes, there was support, but not that kind of support, I would say. There was a journey I had to take on kind of by myself, because there weren't a lot of other teammates on my team that were going through injuries like that. So, and it was unknown territory for me too. I mean, I've rolled my ankle before and whatever, and it's like, okay, you know, kind of play through it. But I couldn't even walk, you know, so it was like I could play through this. So I kind of had to figure it out as I went, and it was hard. It was really hard. So, but I had wonderful support of my teammates and the athletic training staff and the coaches and my friends. But it wasn't like a sports psychology specific kind of support. It was like, you know, your teammate and your best friend support and your family, but it wasn't helping an athlete process through, okay, I'm experiencing this sense of loss, but you can't, when you don't have someone helping guide you through that, it's hard to identify what it is you're going through. And then once you identify it, how to work past it. So.
I was an athlete in high school as well. And so for me, it wasn't as tremendous because I never had the goal of playing in college. But it's like, oh, you used to have, you know, your soccer practice all the time and training and, you know, that team. And then you go to college and it's not there. And it wasn't there for me. So I think even for people who did not have the opportunity to play at the college level, there's always, I mean, there's these changes and transitions in our life in many different ways. And I mean, that was a huge one for you.
Absolutely. I mean, it speaks to identity. I think one of the things I struggled with, and is a topic that is highly researched and studied in the field of sports psychology, is athletic identity. I had grown up playing sports, being an athlete my whole life, and this was the first real experience where I couldn't actually compete, and it took me out of my daily routine, and I was struggling, like, well, who am I without this? Am I Katie, the soccer player, or am I Katie who plays soccer? There's a difference in those two things. And it's not until you really have an understanding of athletic identity, whether you're taken out of your sport because of an injury or you choose to stop playing, and then there's changes that come with that in your lifestyle. There's identity things that people go through. And the same thing happens when athletes graduate college and they're not playing professionally. It's okay, well, now what? Who am I? And there's that transition, and it's true for whatever brings you to the end of your athletic career, I should say.
Yeah, I think similar to that is any time we spend a significant amount of time in any endeavor, you know, we sort of make sense of that through this lens of an identity, and then when we feel like it's not meeting our expectations, especially if we don't have those well defined, or we feel like it's letting us down in a sense, you know, like, oh, like I'm plateauing, then there can be a lot of negative self-talk, and or just you can be that much harder on yourself because, you know, you're so associated with that identity.
Absolutely.
And you know, whether it's I mean, I know, like, just in kind of my whole journey with CrossFit, it's like the amount of hours I was spending in the gym in the beginning, and just having these little aches and pains, or you know, not getting something, and yet being that much harder on myself because I felt like I sort of deserved some success or satisfaction, at least with how much time I was putting in, or how focused I was on the details, and it wasn't fair. And then, you know, how do I separate myself from not receiving the success that I feel like I should be having, in spite of the fact that, you know, all this energy is being put there.
Yeah.
So yeah, the identity thing is fascinating. And then I think for all of us in some capacity now, how do we, you know, when you're moving into that coaching role, how does that change the identity as well, as you associate yourself with a coach, but then also if you're trying to still pursue athletic endeavors and or just try to practice what you preach, and want to be dabbling in whatever you're coaching, you want to feel like there's enough proficiency there to justify your coaching role. And so, those two can also be competing. Have you, what has that shift been like for you, Katie, since graduating in 2009 and adopting, a different identity with, hey, I have my master's in sports psychology, over what, has now been 7 years?
Right. I think people who play sports or participate in some kind of extracurricular activity, whether it be sports or dance or music or a hobby that they like, they're motivated by participating in that, and they're motivated by setting goals. And so I think because I had the experience early in my collegiate career of having to be on the sidelines, right? Mm-hmm. Experiencing life without it, it made the transition post-college a little bit easier. But like I said, once I took that sports psychology class, I then had vision and motivation for what was next.
Yeah.
It's like, okay, cool. Because up to that point, I was getting a degree in psychology, but really wasn't sure if I wanted to do anything else within psychology. There's certain aspects of it that I like.
Right.
But once I found sports psych, it was like, this is it. I'm sports junkie, I guess, and that's can sometimes be atypical for a female, but I grew up playing sports. I love it. I watch it all the time. So I knew I wanted a career in that. So kind of once I got to school, it was, all right, I really enjoy this. I really like this. This is the piece for me that was missing throughout my college career, through all the injuries I had, not just breaking my leg. I had 2 surgeries on my shoulder. It was just, it was a surgical time of my life for me. So.
Oh, gosh.
Philosophically deep. Surgical time in my life.
It was. So for me, that transition became a little bit easier because I had a little experience in being away from that identity as an athlete. But then I had this, okay, I figured out what I want to do, figured it out. Now I have to go to school and do it. And so the next step began. And since then, since graduating with my master's, this field, maybe you can relate to this a little bit so far, Jared, but maybe not yet. You have to be a true entrepreneur in this field. There's not a lot of, right? There's not these big companies like if you're a business major, there's 1 million jobs you could come across. But as a sports psych person, you got to make your own work. So in that respect, that's been the challenge post graduation is finding the clientele. Getting out there on your horse and just finding the people.
So it's
rewarding.
We know it well.
Yeah, it's hard. It is, and sometimes it can put you on this motivational roller coaster. Like, oh man, I got to get on the grind today, but I'm tired. Being on the grind yesterday, but having that background of being goal oriented and motivated is what keeps you going. And then getting those clients where it's like really rewarding. You get this really rewarding experience, whether it's with an intern or whether it's with a team you're working with or a certain client, what they're going through, and you have breakthroughs. That's what keeps you going. So it's all worth it in the end.
Well, and I assume you probably were a unique case in that, or I'm not sure how soon after you graduated it happened, but having the opportunity to work with multiple university teams, in a sense that is kind of like what you were saying. At least it gives you a little bit more of a placeholder to work within, as like, I'm a business grad and I'm going to find a business versus, I'm going to try and, exist in the ether webs. What was that, those experiences like, and was that helpful to have that opportunity to be able to use your skills in a more structured way?
Working at the universities and stuff? Yeah, I mean, it was great how it worked out. I had just gotten out of school, and I had just moved back down to Southern California and was trying to make my way. And this job happened to fall into my lap, and I was so pumped. I was like so pumped, not just to be working in the field, but to be working at a university, because I played played at a university, so it's speaking my language.
Yeah.
Besides the fact it looks really good on your resume to work with college teams.
Yeah. Multiple ones.
Yeah. So it was great. I mean, of course, every job has its pros and cons, but the first year for sure I was over the top excited, and I put in way too many hours for what I ultimately ended up getting paid, but it was worth it.
Yeah.
At that point in my career, it was like,
right.
I will do whatever. I will spend every waking minute here. I want to soak this in. I want to get a good feel for what it's like to be working with a collegiate team from the other side.
Yeah.
From the administrative side versus the athlete side, and I loved it. And it's always been a great area of sports psych for me to, I guess I would say, fall back to, because it's hit so close to home for me.
Right.
So they were wonderful experiences, and I will forever pursue university or collegiate jobs. I like working with the age. So
was it, and so how did they all, was the first one that came about the soccer team, and then did they sort of the tennis come shortly after that, or was that because they were at the same university happening concurrently?
Exactly. The soccer thing came around first, and the soccer coaches were great friends with the tennis coaches, and then it kind of just fell into place. So there was a number of years where I worked season, which made it very challenging. But like I said, you make it work. You figure it out. You sleep less, and you work all day, and so that's kind of how that came about. But I worked with, the women's soccer team at LMU came first, and shortly followed by the women's tennis team. And there were other teams that dabbled in it, that showed interest. And one thing I've learned about working at universities is with college teams and college programs is they're very all over the place in the sense of coaches can say one thing, and then all of a sudden things change, and who got hurt or who didn't, or how things changed within their season, and then they're very busy and forgetful, which is okay.
Yeah.
Me too.
Yeah. Guess we gotta have that empathy.
At the beginning it was frustrating, and now it's like, it's not personal. I get it. And it'll come back around. And
totally, it's very true. What advice would you give to other coaches that currently work within or interested in pursuing working within a university school setting, whether that's in a mental skills coaching context, or even strength and conditioning? I guess some kind of adjunct role is what we're sort of talking about here.
Sure. Advice I'd give: be patient, be open to change, to trial and error. And similar advice I'd give to athletes or new clients. Create a collaborative environment. I find sometimes giving other athletes or coaches a voice to what they think will work, and then collaborate with them, make the experience more meaningful for them, and that's what's important. So I'd say those things.
Was it easier for you to work with like a tennis team, for instance, in which you didn't play that sport, that you could be kind of separate from some of that?
Well, I did play tennis a little bit when I was younger, so I had a little bit of knowledge. And my mom is a big tennis player, so I understand some of the intricacies of it. I guess in a sense it was easier because, yes, I was less familiar with it. But on the other side, sometimes I played soccer and softball, so working with those kind of programs, I have a really much deeper understanding of the mental aspects of it and what you might be thinking in this situation versus this situation.
Right.
So with working with tennis, you really get the opportunity, much like, well, same with soccer, but you let them be the expert on the sport and teach you about the intricacies of the sport. Whereas working with soccer players, they understand that I have that background, so they don't have to come to the meetings with this, need to explain all the details to me.
Right.
If that makes sense.
Yeah, definitely.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, because one of the interesting things I was scoping out your background, your website, is that you work with people who do performance at any level, whether it's, performers, musicians, I think there's, business in there, in addition to athletes. So does your approach change depending on who you're working with?
Absolutely, it has to. I mean, it's individually driven. Even within a soccer team working with player A versus player B, my approach will be different. I think the core foundation that I have doesn't change, but each action plan, that's what I like to call them, that we come up with an athlete would be geared towards your strengths and what you're looking for and what works for you. Because I might have a plan. We might have a plan to do goal setting together, and we come up with a way that works for you. And it might be very different than to do a goal setting plan with Jared. It might be a very different game plan moving forward. So yeah, regardless of the clientele, whether they're performers, musicians, businessmen or women, or athletes, yes, the approach is individualized. The foundation is the same, and who I am as a practitioner is the same, but the approach on how we work things out and the steps and paths we take to reach where we're going is individual.
Mm-hmm. I guess one of the things too that because I don't have a background in sports psychology, and when I am working with people, for me, the figuring out what type of motivation, I guess you could say, that the person's going to respond to is different from person to person. And I have to do a trial and error, and it usually takes me 3 or 4 sessions, which is way too long. So any suggestions you have on that, on how to better figure out what the client not necessarily needs, because I know you could just ask them, but how to meet them where they're at and figure that out quicker.
Yeah, I mean, I know you said that for 3 or 4 sessions is too long, and sometimes it feels too long, but it's actually just what you need to do. And that's why patience comes in. When I start with new athletes or clientele, we have a brief or a conversation about being patient. And I have to be patient and meet you where you're at, but you have to be patient and trust this process a little bit. And we have to build a relationship together before you will really buy into what I'm selling, in a sense. And so the more you get to know someone, the more you learn about them. So we can't really spend 1 hour together and then I could pick out exactly what your motivation is, and that's hard. Even if I ask you, I might want to talk to you a couple times and ask you all kinds of questions and get a sense of what your thought process is and what your outlook is and what drives you before I could really pinpoint your motivation. That makes sense. So yeah, 4 sessions sometimes seems long, but sometimes that's okay.
Thank you for validating that.
Of course.
Yeah, I think what's key with that too is was eye-opening for me within this program thus far is just being aware of the fact that everybody's motivation is going to be somewhat different. And for one of my classes, I did practice sessions with a volunteer who was at the CrossFit gym that I worked at, and it was just a huge epiphany when she just started describing, what kind of motivation she responded to versus what she didn't. And it was an epiphany in just the essence of needing to know and not make the assumption otherwise, which I think, when you go into these group fitness classes, the assumption is that everybody responds to loud music and yelling, and all of a sudden, to be like, wow, what if we had an opportunity to, even if it was only 5-10 minutes, to just sit down with everyone and create a little bit more of a personal interaction to set the stage and the awareness for both parties that we're aware and interested in those individual nuances, I feel like then at least we can be ready to consume those signals or that information that's going to help us tailor our approach.
Absolutely. That's a good example, and I'm sure you experienced it too with the internship you just did, and recognizing that each kid you worked with was motivated by different factors. Some like to improve from their last performance. Some like to beat somebody else. Some like to win. Some like to it's different for everybody. And not to say there's necessarily only one right way or only one wrong way. I think there's a long list of both.
Yeah.
And some another perspective to your original question, Alex, is another great way to kind of help figure out someone's motivation is to observe them in their environment. Sometimes we don't always have that opportunity. In the beginning, a lot of times it's conversation based, but if you get the chance to ever work with a client and observe them in their environment, it can give you good insights, because sometimes they might say something to you, but then it might be very different when you observe them, and that becomes a topic of conversation. Well, why do you think that is, and how can we work through that? And so if the opportunity presents itself to do some observation, see if you could jump on it, because it can be very insightful.
For sure. Now, when you say observation in their environment, for athletes, I imagine it's them doing their sport.
Sure.
But what about if you're working with, like a business person?
Right. It is challenging to just be sitting in someone's office with them, watching them work.
Right.
It becomes a little bit awkward.
I'll just sit here in the corner with the clipboard.
Yeah, exactly. Depending on what their job is in the business world, if it's very individual based, then that's what you're going to have to do. Kind of try to live an hour in the life. But if they're in a business environment where it's very team oriented, then going to a meeting or some kind of exercise or group project that they're working on together, and kind of see how things play out that way. It could be a little more awkward than just sitting on the sidelines watching someone compete in their sport. But it's something you can build up towards.
Yeah, it just made me think actually too about, this whole concept of, the reciprocal nature of coaching, that like we're all, that we can all be each other's coaches, and there doesn't necessarily have to be this seniority or status aspect. And, and the opportunity, if you have a client that, like how can I attend something that you're the master of, in a sense,
right.
And experience you in your element, teaching me all about your craft, and just like whatever that may entail, even if it's like, hey, I'm working with somebody that's a web designer. Like, can you help me with my website? All of a sudden, in like their context, you can get a different essence of them and their element, where it's completely different than you having to lead a conversation or a relationship. And actually, what came to mind, Alex, is Jill Miller, the creator of Yoga Tune-Up. I know she, her strength conditioning coach is this guy Josh Landis, I believe. And I remember when she had her like the debut of her second role model sequencing and innovation training. I remember he came to that training, and I distinctly remember like sitting behind him thinking how cool it was that here he was, Jill's strength conditioning coach, and here he was also attending her seminar as a student. And so kind of the flip-flop that I'm sure is of value for, he's getting value out of the teachings and years of experience she has to offer, but then also he's getting value out of how he can translate that back into when he's in the gym with her and she has a barbell overhead, and, speak to what he knows is kind of at the root of her enthusiasm and passion.
Right. Yeah, that's a great example. That reciprocal coaching is such a great tool, in putting your ego aside that I'm the only expert here. Well, no, I might know a lot about this topic, but you might be able to also provide me some insights that I hadn't thought about from your perspective, whether it's on your specific expertise or even mine. So being open-minded is a great open-minded, and recognizing that giving them that voice to be the expert in their endeavor is important. Definitely. It gives you, like you said, gives you a lot of insight on, how they think, how they process, how they present, how they feel. Sometimes you can pick those things out just by observing.
Yeah. And I think it also it challenges the maybe presumptions about a session with a mental skills coach, or even, a session in which you're going in as the client, expecting to sort of be obedient, I don't go to the doctor's office expecting to necessarily tell him what he should prescribe me.
Although, sorry, I was like, some people totally do that.
Oh yeah. Nowadays, I don't know. I'm a little more skeptical.
That's right.
But definitely, there's that sort of, hey, he has the white coat and I just wore jeans and a t-shirt here.
Yeah.
But yet, as the practitioner, I think to immediately kind of throw that out there and sort of, allow them to be the expert, is definitely something that is a worthy tool and probably deserves more attention in the coaching strategy.
Yeah, well, everybody, no matter what they're doing, wants to feel like they bring value.
Yeah.
And they want to feel like their voice matters. And even not just in sports psych, but in coaching soccer and whatnot, giving, when I've had the opportunity to give my players the voice, hey, what do you guys want to do? We have 15 minutes, you guys pick.
Yeah.
It gives them that extra buy-in, yes, we have a voice and we are providing you with the information about what we want and how what we view is important to us right now. And it just creates this really great relationship. They're bought into what you bring to the table. You're bought into how they're, performing and participating. Having fun and feeling like you matter and you bring value is important for everybody. Whether you're an athlete, a mom, a dad, a son, a daughter, a businesswoman, a businessman, whatever you do, feeling like you're important and you know things that you can bring to the table to make a difference matters. So giving people that voice, whether it's in the first session or the middle session, whatever it is, giving them a voice where they're yes, I'm the expert on this. And that's how I set up sessions. You're the expert on you.
Yeah.
So teach me about you.
Right.
How you think, how you feel, what matters to you, and together we can create this great action plan to achieve what it is you're looking to achieve. But that can be best achieved by you helping me understand who you are, so I can help gear this to what matters to you. Right. It's not about what I want, and that's sometimes hard to put aside for practitioners or coaches. It's not about me. It's about these kids and these athletes and these clients that we have. It's about them and what their goals are and what they're trying to achieve here. Mm-hmm. How do I put me aside so that I can help them achieve the best version of them?
Totally.
Yeah. I think that can be the hardest thing sometimes when you're working with a client and your goals for them are different from what their goals are. And that can oftentimes be a disconnect. And I've had to just step aside and be like, this is not about me. So I'll do whatever they want. So we'll continue to be cohesive together.
Absolutely. Cohesiveness is a great way to describe it. And you know what? I see a lot of this. I do work with parents occasionally, if I'm working with a youth team, for example, I'll suggest doing a couple parent meetings just to give them insight on what it's like for them. because often where I find a lot of the disconnect is between an athlete and their parent. Or even if they're not athletes, my parents, wanted to, maybe it's a son and my dad played football, but he played in college, but he didn't make it to the NFL. And so that's always been his dream. And so he becomes this like insane, like
rah parent.
You're going to make it to the NFL. And we're going to do whatever it takes. And we're starting at 6 years old. And that can be where the big disconnect comes, because that kid might not want to play football. Right. And I've seen it too before with, not necessarily clients, but even just, friends or acquaintances where their dad had this dream that, you're going to be a lawyer. And they're like, well, I don't want to be a lawyer.
Yeah.
I want to be a doctor or whatever, or I want to be I'll get a business degree. And it creates this disconnect, and it's unfortunate, but helping educate people, helping those particular kids, for example, find the voice to express that in a non-confrontational way, which sometimes is hard, and then helping the parents gain the understanding that this is your dream, but this isn't about you, and that's hard to do sometimes. And sometimes it's how you present the information and present it in a neutral kind of informational way, and then if they want more information, you could go deeper with it. Have you guys heard of, I don't know if it's still on the air, but there was a show earlier this year or last year. It was called Coaching Bad.
No.
I think that's what it was called. Jeez, I hope I'm not.
We'll look it up and put it in the show notes.
It was co-hosted by Ray Lewis, who played for the Baltimore Ravens, and like a counselor. Gosh, I can't think of his name. And they brought in, 10 coaches who all had this reputation, this bad reputation, basically, as coaches. And it brought them in. It was kind of like a reality show. They all lived in a house, and they went to sessions, and they processed through why they are the way they are. It was, from a sports psych perspective, I was soaking it up.
Yeah.
I think it would be a great, I don't know if it's still on or if it's coming back, but I don't know. I enjoyed it from a sports psych perspective and a coaching perspective, because they were extreme. They're very extreme, bad coaches, kind of verbally abusive, and just, it was their way or the highway, and it kind of highlighted some of the things that I'm talking about now. And sometimes by the end, they were able to let go of all that anger and, failure that they had from their own past and become better. And some didn't. And that's just, sometimes that's the name of the game. But if you guys check it out or look for clips of it, it was really, really fascinating.
Yeah, it sounds really cool.
Yeah.
Like bad coaches, it makes me think of, and also you mentioned, as an entrepreneur, and we're out there hustling, there's sometimes I meet people where I'm like, you know what, you and I are really not a good fit. I think you should go work with somebody else, or maybe a few sessions down the line that becomes more clear. Do you do that as well? Do you select the type of clients you want to work with, or do they kind of self-select, or?
That's a great question. I'd like to say no, I don't select the kind of clients. If someone's interested in working with me, then yes, I'm interested in working with them. Like you said, we're always out there hustling, and I'm not going to turn anybody away. But you're right, sometimes it's just not a right fit. And if that's the case, then yeah, you have to refer to someone else, or kind of take a step back and figure out, is this going to work? And if so, how are we going to make it work? And I think it's okay to maybe address it in a session with that person, because chances are they sense it as well. If it's not a good fit, you kind of feel it. But that doesn't always mean that you can't work together. I think it's about addressing it, and if it's agreed upon that you both are willing to kind of make it work and find a way, then yeah, you can continue working together. But if it's too strong of not a great fit, then I think it's important to refer out. And that comes back to the foundation of at least especially, and I'm sure Jared's learning this at JFK too, but the underlying theme of our work is what's in the best interest of the client. We want to do things that are in the best interest for them and prevent harm to them. Not that we're harming them, but if we're not the best fit for them and someone else might be, then we should refer out so they can have the best experience. Because not only is it important for their well-being and experience and what they're looking for, but if you pull it back a little even deeper, you want them to walk away with a good taste in their mouths about sports psychology.
Yeah.
So if that means I have to refer out, put my ego aside and say, you know what, I got to refer this person to somebody else where they're going to it's going to be a better fit, then I have to do it.
Yeah, it's a great point about like the larger communities you exist within, and like putting your ego aside to even just be aware of that, and say like, in what way am I representing this community or this title, this brand, of coaching that I want to make sure I'm paying it forward in the way that I would hope others are also, being cognizant of respecting that reputation.
One would hope so, huh?
Yeah. So I'm curious about some of the other layers of your coaching. I noticed you have a background in Olympic weightlifting.
Yes,
And
I do.
I'm curious when and how that came about, and in what ways, if at all, you're able to integrate the different skill sets you have, or integrate the different modalities of coaching that you have in your toolbox, or if you find you're when you are working with someone, you're staying more in kind of one lane, so to speak.
Let's go back to the history books for a minute. This all started. I'm a pretty petite person, and when I was in high school playing sports, specifically soccer, I would get knocked off the ball like that. Mm-hmm. And my coach would be like, look, we need to beef you up a little bit. Let's be real. We need to get some muscle on you. So I started working out with a sports performance coach who I would work with 2 or 3 times a week, and I fell in love with it.
Wow, awesome.
And so, yes, I did get stronger, and I loved it. And to this day, I still appreciate lifting and working out, and that's that half of the picture. But then when I was going back for my master's, I worked as a sports performance instructor, got a weightlifting certification, and I started training. I worked at a facility, and we trained athletes. We designed sport-specific workouts for them and trained them, whether it was preseason, postseason, in-season, whatever. And I loved it. So I was able to work there and get my master's at the same time. Currently, right now, in terms of weightlifting and that sports performance certification, because also while I got my master's, I did a certification in sports performance. It's less actual hands-on coaching and teaching that stuff.
Yeah.
Less than I would love to get back into that eventually, because I think, sometimes when you're in school, they teach it as black and white, but I think there's a lot of gray area in between where you can combine a lot of different things and have a lot of different modalities like you spoke of. So with clientele now, and this is more so when I'm coaching versus when I'm doing sports psych, but it's built into what I do every day, right? Just like sports psych is, whether I'm having a conversation with a team or an athlete that I'm working with, or I'm talking to the 9-6-year-old boys that I'm coaching right now. The sports psych is always built into who I am, I guess, know. Whether it's like I say, conversation with friends or so the background that I have in the couple of different areas that I have some certifications or degrees in plays out daily. It might not be as overt as, yes, I'm coaching a sports performance class right now, and then I'm working with a team, but they're mixed together.
Got it. That makes sense. Yeah, I like that idea that it's it's there, and so it's always influencing the thought process.
Absolutely.
And I think in a lot of ways, like you said, the sports psych actually acts more as the overall context. That's always there, and so it's really the others, I guess, that then get layered on accordingly.
Right. One of the athletes I worked with when I was at LMU had a similar love for weightlifting and sports performance, and she is now pursuing a degree in sports performance, and like she has her CSCS, and she's training athletes, and we were able to discuss that on a regular basis. In my experience, a lot of the female athletes that I work with at the collegiate level are a little bit less into weightlifting, because they don't always understand the benefits. So
Right.
having my background in that, sometimes our conversation would be about, well, we got to go, we have lifting with whomever in the morning, and you could kind of break down the mental and physical benefits to that.
Yeah.
It's not just a physical benefit, there's mental benefits. And now this particular player that I have, I think, has a good understanding of the mental side of it and why it's important. And she can bring that to the table too.
Yeah, very cool.
So it definitely, it's all mixed together. And that's what I like, I like that about it. It's not just one or the other. It's a lot of different things that come together.
Right. And then I think it also, it kind of breaks down the more cliche definitions of sport too, right? It's like, this is something I thought about when I applied to JFK. Is like, well, what do we really, this is, I think, is like an age old question in a sense. Like, how do we define something as a sport? And so the more we can integrate these otherwise seemingly disparate modalities, the more we can be a part of that solution of not being so black or white about, this is reserved for sport only. But life is a sport. So
exactly, and I still work out a lot at the gym or whatever, and sometimes people will come up and ask, what are you training for? And at this point, I'm training for life.
Yeah, right, totally. Yeah, it is interesting.
That 24-pack of water bottles at Costco. That's what I'm training for.
Yeah, without a doubt. That's what all those farmer carries are for, Like, I don't need help out. Like, that's what I'm training for. I don't need help out with my groceries, okay?
I got it, bro.
I got to see if I can carry all 17 bags up the 3 flights of stairs at the same time, so I don't have to make 2 trips.
Yes.
Because he likes to make 2 trips. Yeah.
Same here.
All right. Well, being cognizant of your time, we're gonna move things into our rapid fire realm of episode. And I'm actually curious, just with this one we haven't asked others, which is, what does your current practice look like? And you can answer that however that makes sense to you.
Okay. My current practice right now is a little bit in between. I just finished up working with some teams, and I'm kind of taking a step back to plan out and work on a couple new ideas to see which direction I could take it. So in that sense, that's where it is.
Okay. And are there anything within, aside from how you're offering your services to others, that you're practicing for your own benefit?
In terms of, like, if I'm doing sports like practice on my own, is that what you're asking?
Yeah, like whether there's a particular sport psych exercise or technique you're spending more time on, or if there's like, hey, I'm pursuing this activity just to sort of add to my own body of
Sure.
of being in the field of learning new skills and trying to understand them within your own framework.
Every single day, yes, I'm practicing something. I never knew the importance. I obviously knew the importance of breathing, but of conscious breathing, I should say.
Yeah.
And how much it can be a help to your daily life. And I would say another big thing that I practice every day is self-talk.
Yeah.
I spoke earlier about sometimes you could get on this roller coaster of, yes, I'm doing a bunch of stuff and a bunch of work, and then I'm kind of figuring things out, and then I'm back up. And so maintaining a consistent outlook and mindset and positive self-talk, I think, is important. And I'm a big believer in practicing what I preach, in whether it's weightlifting or exercise-based or sports psychology-based. I like to experience it before I ask you to.
Right.
Because then I come from a place of experience and I understand, this was hard at first, but then I stuck with it and it worked, or whatever the case is. And maybe the more obvious one is goal setting. With my athletic background, I find myself to be goal driven. And even myself as a sports psychology coach, I find it challenging to stay on track with my goals.
Yeah, totally.
And I think that that's the case for everybody. I might know a whole lot of stuff about goal setting and how to stay on track with my goals. But I'm human, and sometimes it's like, I'll do it tomorrow. Just like everybody else. So I get that side of it. So I'd say those three are the three main aspects. Try to, read up on different articles or stuff that I see, or that even other colleagues post on different social media sites. It's like, oh yeah, this is awesome. Because I think there's starting to be a lot more stuff like that out there.
Yeah, definitely.
So, hopefully that answers your question. Yeah, there's a lot of stuff. So
I feel like we need you back to help us with a whole episode on goal setting. I think that would be really helpful for many people, myself included.
Yes, I help myself too. I would love to do that. So just let me know. We could do a whole discussion on that.
What is your biggest coaching or teaching pet peeve?
That is such a great question. I think, without getting too political here, I think sometimes people can make the assumption that I don't know as much about sports because I'm a woman.
Okay.
And I think sometimes, that's their loss, because it turns out I know quite a bit. And I think another coaching or teaching pet peeve would be, and I sometimes find myself doing this, so it's it can be a self pet peeve as well, but kind of throwing in the towel before you've really given it a good try. Sometimes your work with a client takes more than a few sessions, and we are in this society where it's like we need this instant knowledge and gratification and instant results, and that's not always the case, especially with this. Especially with sports psych and kind of adopting change. So I sometimes get frustrated with that, and I've done it myself.
Right.
So it comes from a place of, God, I didn't like it when I did it, and it can be frustrating when other people do it, because how much this can help. How much this process could help and the positive change it could bring, and but I can't make them do it. So
no, it's like, just listen to me. I know what I'm talking about.
Please, but if it's not for you, if that person's not willing to go there, then okay, I can't make you, and I don't want to. I don't want to make you, because that can make it even worse.
Definitely. Yeah. As a coach, what gives you the biggest payoff, and what worries you the most?
I would say the biggest payoff is seeing something you've been working on with a person click and start to create positive change for them. Where you see that pure joy, like, oh, I've worked really hard towards this and now I've accomplished it. It feels really good as the person who helped them do that. And it's not always about you, but you feel good about them feeling good.
Yeah.
It's that contagious feeling. So, and what worries me, I think it speaks to some that pet peeve a little bit is, sometimes a person's not willing to go on that journey with you, and it worries you that because they're not willing to go on that journey, will they be able to get where they're going?
That's a great
Not
one.
that necessarily that they always need your help to get there, but if they're not willing to go there with you, then are they going to be willing to go there at all?
Yeah, that's a really great point. I know that's something I've experienced, and I'm sure Alex as well, especially in the mobility space of it's not always as appealing for somebody to work on range of motion and body control and soft tissue, but like seeing it from where you're at and knowing that, like, they may be at a particular point where things are pretty fragile, and you worry about, and the same thing psychologically, like when somebody's just so hell bent on overtraining,
Right.
and you worry about, their well-being and kind of like what is the role you can have that can turn the tide for them, and at the same time, because it's so fragile, like you're walking on a little bit of a thin line, trying to make sure that what you do or say has the right effect and moves them in that direction.
Totally. And with just like you were saying, with certain mobility things, it's hard, I mean, getting your body to move those ways sometimes is like, I don't think it's going to move that way.
Yeah.
But it's very similar with sports, like, because sometimes you're going to a deep place and you're asking someone to really look deep inside themselves, or to try to track, where this is coming from or where that thought process comes from. And that's hard, no matter who you are. That's hard to look inside yourself and recognize maybe some weaknesses that you're trying to pull out and strengthen. So because of that, sometimes people are turned off to the idea of doing it at all.
Mm-hmm.
What element, characteristic, or personality trait do you bring to coaching that people would least expect or may see as odd?
That is such a challenging question. I was thinking about this because I appreciate that you sent it to me ahead of time so I could think about this one.
Yeah.
It's so hard. What I came up with was maybe patience. I think in my journey with sports psych, I have learned to appreciate patience. And I think sometimes coaches stereotypically aren't thought to have a ton of patience, right? Because it's a very results-driven world, and they have high expectations, not only of their athletes, but then whoever is their boss is expecting them to create results. And so sort of this very pressure-driven world and results-driven world. So I think sometimes when I can bring patience to the table, whether it's coaching or it's with a sport, or it's sports psych related, I don't know. I like to think it's refreshing.
Yeah, definitely.
I've had those coaches where it's like, whoa, geez, like, give me a minute.
Right.
Give me a minute. And maybe another one would be humor. Right? I like to be fun loving and create a fun atmosphere and crack jokes and make people laugh. So sometimes that might come across as unprofessional, but for me, it's about creating a comfortable environment and building rapport and making people feel like they're in a space where they're not being judged and it's not this formal. I think sometimes psychology in general comes with this stigma with it, and it's not always like lay on the couch, tell me about your life kind of stuff. It's fun, let's make it fun. Let's make it something you look forward to doing, and where you feel comfortable enough to crack a joke or two with me. Maybe that's how we start. So
definitely. Yeah. Tell me a joke.
Yeah. Homework, bring me a joke next week.
Yeah, that's great. All right. Well, to be cognizant of your time, one more here. We usually end with asking, what does it mean to practice what you preach? But I think you've already done such a fantastic job of
Sorry, I jumped the gun.
yeah,
Sorry.
of going there. So I'm gonna take it really person specific, and that is to ask you, what does it mean to you to cultivate and pursue an elite mind and performance?
It means to be willing to work hard, to be committed to the process, to be open to change, whether it's physical or mental, so that with your goals in mind, no matter what they are, you're committed to the process.
Yeah.
So to cultivate an elite mind and performance is to practice those things every single day. Whether it's specifically towards that goal or it's just in your daily endeavors, wake up looking forward to what's in front of you. And that's not always easy.
Yeah.
I recognize that too. And same for myself. I'm practicing what I preach every day too. So, being willing to be on the journey and recognize that, it's so cliche. It's not a sprint, it's a marathon, but sometimes that could be very true.
Yeah.
It's one day at a time with, 1 day at a time, 1 week at a time, 1 month at a time. And it's one step on the ladder towards what it is we're working towards and towards who it is you want to be. Being okay to fail, because I think sometimes fail brings you to success.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. That process. I always feel like as inspirational as movies can be, they're also a little misleading in the transformations that can happen in 2 hours.
Right.
Especially in like my favorite, sport inspirational films. It's like
You achieved all of that in 90 minutes.
Yeah.
I'm a sucker for those movies too, but you got to keep things realistic.
Yeah. that training montage just doesn't happen all the time.
Where's my slow-mo?
Yeah.
That's true. We need more movies like that.
Yeah, which is why I appreciate Boyhood, which I still haven't seen, but the idea that he filmed that over 10, 12 years, and I'm sure it lends a little bit more of a authenticity with the transformation that you can witness in that 2 or 3 hour film.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
Well, thank you so much, Katie. This has been a blast. It's always really fun for Alex and I to have these conversations, especially with guests as experienced and thoughtful as yourself. So thank you.
Thank you. Yeah, I appreciate very much being here. I enjoyed it. And hopefully we can come together for that goal setting session.
Yeah, goal setting.
Definitely, yeah.
Where can people find more about you?
My website, elitemindandperformance.com. And it's the best place. My email is the same, elitemind with a number 1 @gmail.com. Any questions or comments or concerns, let me know.
Cool.
Fantastic. Well, we'll sign off here, and until next time.
Sounds great, guys. Appreciate it.
Yes, thank you.
All right.
Hey guys, thanks for listening to Behind the Podium, Unveiling the Coach. If you have enjoyed what you listened to, head over to iTunes and leave us a review. More information on each episode and the podcast in general can be found at behindthepodiumpodcast.com. We'll catch you next time.